A fake compliance officer went door to door demanding cash from elderly residents, threatening liens, fines, even ramp removals. With a fake badge and real arrogance, Rick preyed on fear and silence. But Laura had a secret weapon. Her cousin runs internal affairs, and he was already watching. Just wait until you see how this neighborhood turned the tables and justice hit back hard. It started like any other late spring morning, mild sun, birdsong, and the faint scent of honeysuckle drifting through Laura Mendez's screen door. She was rinsing out her coffee mug when the knock came, firm, practiced, and just aggressive enough to raise her guard. Standing on her porch was a man she'd never seen before. He wore a dark green shirt tucked into cargo pants and a black ball cap with a generic embroidered emblem. A shiny silver badge was pinned to his chest, the kind you'd expect from a Halloween aisle if you looked closely. But from a distance, it passed. In one hand he held a clipboard, and in the other a manila envelope that looked suspiciously well used. "Morning, ma'am," he said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Rick, Community Standards Compliance Officer for this zone. I'm doing property checks today. Looks like your address came up for an immediate inspection fee." Laura blinked. "I'm sorry, what inspection fee?" He flipped a page on his clipboard, running a finger down a scribbled list. "Yep, $175 for unregistered patio clutter. It's a non-compliance observation, and the policy requires same-day payment, cash only. Saves you the paperwork and the lien we'd have to place tomorrow otherwise." She stared at him, stunned. Her heart thudded once, loudly. Her yard was spotless. A freshly swept path led from the curb to her red brick steps. Her patio? 2 lawn chairs and a ceramic frog. That was it. "I've never heard of a cash inspection fee," she said slowly, "and I don't recall that job title in any HOA emails." Rick raised an eyebrow, like she'd asked something deeply inconvenient. "Yeah, we don't always publish everything in the newsletter. Some tasks get delegated. I'm contracted enforcement. You know how it is. Boards get busy. Stuff slips through." He tried to hand her the envelope. "Best just to take care of it now. Avoid the red tape. You pay me, I mark it cleared, and we're good." Laura didn't move. Her instincts were screaming. She glanced past him. No HOA logo on his shirt. No marked vehicle. Just a white SUV parked slightly crooked at the curb. Engine humming. Rear hatch closed. No laptop mount. No municipal plates. His badge had no number. His name tag, laminated paper tucked into a plastic holder. She stepped back into the doorway. "And if I don't pay right now?" Rick's smile tightened. "Then the file escalates to enforcement. Lien notice by tomorrow, maybe fines by Friday. Once the wheels turn, it gets expensive. Fast." Her palms began to sweat, but her voice held steady. "You got an ID?" He chuckled. "Ma'am, I'm the ID. This is your only warning." She didn't respond, just let the door swing a few inches toward the frame. The air between them suddenly felt 10 degrees heavier. She watched as Rick adjusted his clipboard, scribbled something with a cheap pen, and turned without another word. As he walked off, she saw it. His clipboard had at least 20 names on it, and every one of them might be paying him right now. Laura didn't sleep that night. What began as suspicion had twisted into something deeper, more personal. By sunrise, she was walking door to door, not to gossip, but to listen. What she heard didn't just confirm her fears. It lit a fire. Mrs. Darlene, her next-door neighbor and a retired librarian known for her cardigans and razor-sharp memory, spoke in a low voice behind a storm door. "He told me our front ramp was non-compliant, said it was a tripping hazard for pedestrians." She paused, eyes narrowing. "George can't walk, Laura. He uses that ramp every single day, and Rick said if we didn't pay $200 by sunset, he'd start the removal process." Laura clenched her jaw. "Did you pay?" Darlene looked away. "We couldn't risk it." 2 doors down, Chris and his wife Jenna had their own version of the same nightmare. Rick had flagged their decorative picket fence, white-painted, lined with lavender, as a rodent attractant, warning them that it violated some vague pest control ordinance. Then came the offer, $250 in cash, and the citation would quietly disappear. "He made it sound like we were lucky," Chris said bitterly, "like we were getting a deal." Laura's neighborhood wasn't rich, but it was proud. Vietnam vets lived across from young families, teachers, caregivers, retired postal workers. Most weren't confrontational, and that's exactly who Rick had targeted. Not the loud or litigious, the quiet, the vulnerable, the ones less likely to question a clipboard and a badge with shiny edges. And where was the HOA board in all this? The president, Greg Sorensen, was on a cruise. The treasurer claimed she'd never authorized anything like this. The secretary shrugged and muttered, "I'm just a volunteer. I don't get involved in enforcement stuff." No answers, no accountability, just silence. That's when anger became clarity. Rick wasn't improvising. He was running a calculated scheme. He'd crafted an illusion of authority so precise, so rehearsed, that even smart, seasoned people like Darlene had handed over their savings out of fear. He was using the language of compliance, fines, liens, citations, to cloak good, honest people in shame. He wasn't enforcing rules. He was weaponizing them. But what Rick didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Laura Mendez wasn't alone. Her cousin, Marcus Dean, was a career lawman. And not just any deputy. He was the head of internal affairs for the county sheriff's department. The man who investigated bad cops, fake credentials, and abuses of power. He didn't take kindly to imposters. So while Rick stalked porches and scribbled names, Laura opened her laptop, typed up a detailed log of every neighbor's experience, and picked up the phone. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was prepared. Laura's voice didn't shake when she called Marcus that night. She had a legal pad full of notes, a USB stick with photos of Rick's SUV, and a timeline that read more like a police report than a neighbor's complaint. She laid it all out. The phony badge, the vague threats, the intimidation tactics, the cash-only demands. She even listed every neighbor Rick had allegedly visited in the last 2 weeks. Marcus didn't interrupt. He just listened. And when she finished, he gave a low exhale and said 6 words that made the air in the room tighten like a vice. "We've been tracking someone like this." By dawn, 2 men from Internal Affairs pulled up in an unmarked van. They didn't ask many questions. They brought tools. Within 10 minutes, a matchbook-sized surveillance camera was tucked behind Laura's porch light fixture, angled perfectly toward to the front steps. It was subtle, professional, and bait. At exactly 10:17 a.m., Rick returned, clipboard in hand, the same casual strut as before. But this time he didn't bother with pretense. No fake smile, no soft tone. He said her backyard violated fence elevation code, then doubled the fee to $200 for a repeat compliance breach. His voice carried the same arrogance, the same rehearsed authority. He handed her the envelope again. Laura, calm as ever, handed over a decoy payment, marked bills folded neatly inside. Rick didn't even check. He stuffed it in his back pocket, turned to leave, and the street lit up in flashing blue. From both ends of the cul-de-sac, 2 unmarked cruisers rolled in fast, silent at first, then activating sirens as they closed in. Rick froze mid-step. The clipboard slipped from his hand and bounced off the pavement. Marcus stepped out of the black SUV across the street, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. Laura watched from behind her screen door, heart pounding, not from fear, but from something sharper. Righteous satisfaction. Rick raised his hands halfway, confusion giving way to panic. "This is a misunderstanding," he blurted. "I'm contracted enforcement." Marcus didn't flinch. He crossed the sidewalk in 2 strides and yanked the badge from Rick's chest. One look at it, and he let out a humorless chuckle. "This," Marcus said, holding up the laminated fake for the body cam. "You just committed felony extortion, on surveillance, with a forged badge. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a record." He nodded toward the officers. "Book him." Rick didn't argue. He just stood there, blinking, as the illusion shattered around him. And for the first time in weeks, Laura exhaled. Justice didn't just knock. It marched in. Within hours of Rick's arrest, formal charges were filed. 7 felony counts ranging from impersonating a public officer to fraud, criminal intimidation, and financial exploitation of the elderly. Background checks revealed a string of similar scams across 2 other states, all under a different name. He had slipped through cracks before, but this time he'd gone after the wrong neighborhood and the wrong woman. Laura wasn't just a victim now. She was a witness, an organizer, and the reason a career scammer would finally face real consequences. At the arraignment hearing, the courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Marcus sat in the front row, pressed and calm in his uniform. Laura and Mrs. Darlene sat behind him, flanked by neighbors who'd once felt isolated and ashamed, now united by one thing. They'd all been targeted, but they weren't afraid anymore. When Rick was brought in wearing cuffs, there was no more swagger, just a man who looked much smaller without his clipboard in act. Marcus took the stand and laid out the case, the surveillance footage, the forged badge, the cash collections. By the time he finished, the judge didn't hesitate. Bail denied. Back in the neighborhood, word spread quickly. The HOA board, under pressure from county authorities, released a written apology on official letterhead. It was stiff, overly formal, and obviously written by a lawyer, but it was public. That mattered. The president of the board, Greg Sorensen, submitted his resignation due to personal stress. No one asked for more detail. And just days later, a legitimate HOA compliance officer, clearly trained, respectful, and in a real uniform, visited each affected household. No clipboards, no threats, just clear statements. You are not in violation. Your case is closed. That Saturday, Laura did something bold. She threw a block party. The banner draped between two trees in her front yard read, "No more fake fees." Neighbors brought folding chairs, casseroles, and lemonade. Darlene made her famous sweet tea. Marcus, now affectionately nicknamed Sheriff Grillmaster, stood behind a smoking barbecue, flipping burgers with the same hand that once held a courtroom file on Rick. Kids rode bikes down the middle of the street. The air was filled with music, laughter, and something the neighborhood hadn't felt in weeks: relief. Rick's white SUV had been towed and impounded the day of his arrest. His badge, plastic, flimsy, and laughably fake, now sat on Marcus's desk, pinned under glass, labeled with a sticky note, "Souvenir from Elmwood Lane." Laura looked around her yard, took a long sip of sweet tea, and smiled, not just because Rick was gone, but because the silence he'd used to divide them had been replaced by music, voices, and a shared, hard-earned peace.